Hey guys, welcome to the 44th C programming tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at enumerations. So let's just go ahead right here and take a look at an example of where you'd want to use an enumeration. So first we're just going to go ahead and create the prototype for a function, and this function is just going to print out a phrase onto the screen depending on what season of the year the user passes through as a parameter. So we're just going to go ahead right here and make the return type void, since we don't need to get any information back to the caller. And then we're just going to go ahead and call this function print phrase. And here's the hard part, because there is no variable whose type is season. So one thing that we could do is just create an integer, and then the number that the user passes through will correspond to some season. So 0 will correspond to summer, 1 will correspond to fall, 2 will correspond to winter, and 3 will correspond to spring. So we're just going to say int I right there. So here is our function prototype. However, using an integer is certainly not the best way to do it. What we could do is use an enumeration. So the first thing that we're going to do right here is create an enumeration. And the first thing that we need to do in order to create an enumeration is write out the keyword type, def, and then following that write out the enum keyword. So just write out enum. And then following this, just go ahead and put 2 curly braces. And then after the last curly brace, we're just going to want to give a name to our enum or enumeration. I'm just going to go ahead and call it season. And then following that, we just need to put a semicolon, just like struct and union. Alright, so inside of here is where we can basically just list all of the things that we want to be inside of our enumeration. Now we just want to have all 4 seasons, so I'm just going to go ahead and start with summer and then list them from there. So I'm going to say summer, and then to separate each one of the enumerants, or each one of the things inside of your enumeration, what you can do is just separate them with a comma. And if you want to, you can put each enumerant on a different line. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave them all in one line for right now. So I'm going to say summer, fall, winter, and spring. Alright, and each one of these things inside of this enumeration is called an enumerant. So summer is an enumerant, fall is an enumerant, and so on. Alright, so inside of our enumeration right here, we have all 4 seasons of the year. So now, instead of having the user pass through some number that will correspond to a season, we can actually have the user pass through a season, since we created this enumeration. So we can just go ahead and change this to season s, and we can call this season right here because we created an enumeration called season. Alright, so now let's just go ahead and actually build this function. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this function prototype right here and just paste it down here. Alright, so now what we want to do is just check and see which season the user passed through. So we're going to say if s equals summer, and the reason that we can do if s equals summer is because summer is an enumerant inside of our enumeration called season right here. So we can say if s equals summer, then we just want to print some phrase out onto the screen. And I'm just going to print out onto the screen, it's hot out. Alright, and now we need to do it for the other 3 seasons. So we're going to say else if s is equal to fall, which is another season, then we can just go ahead and print out onto the screen, it's getting cooler. So I'll say it's getting cooler. Alright, and now I just need to do one for winter. So else if s is equal to winter, then we're just going to go ahead and print out onto the screen it's cold out. So it's cold out, end the line. And finally we need to do one for spring. So else if s is equal to spring, then we're just going to go ahead and print out onto the screen it's getting warmer. So tab printf, it's getting warmer. Alright, so now we have our function called print phrase built, and this print phrase function takes one parameter, and that is a season. So let's just go ahead and call this function. So we're going to say print phrase, and like I said, this function takes a season. So now if we want to pass through summer, we just write summer inside of here. Alright, so now let's just go ahead and run this and see what we get out onto the screen. We should get it's hot out. Yep, perfect. And if I were to change this to winter, then we should get the phrase for winter. So we should get it's cold out. Yep, perfect. Alright, so now instead of passing through a season, let me go ahead and pass through a number. I'm going to go ahead and pass through the number 2 and see what happens. We run it and we get the phrase for winter. Well, that's because each one of these enumerants corresponds to some number. The first enumerant always defaultly corresponds to 0, the second defaultly corresponds to 1, and so on. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. So when we passed through 2 right here, it was the exact same thing as passing through winter. So that's why we got out onto the screen, it's cold out. So if I were to change this to 0 right here and run this, we should get it's hot out for summer. And if you want to, you can override what number each one of these enumerants corresponds to. So let's say that we want summer to correspond to the number 50. Well, we can just go ahead right here and say summer equals 50. Alright, so if I were to change this to 1, you'd think I'd just get fall, since fall corresponds to 1. Well, you're wrong, I get nothing, because once you change this to 50 right here, you're changing this one to 51, this one to 52, and this one to 53. So the value that an enumerant corresponds to is always 1 greater than the enumerant before it. So since we overrode this one to equal 50, then this one equals 51, this one equals 52, and this one equals 53. Now the only way that this would be false is if I changed the value of this to something different. So if I wanted to, I could override the value of fall, and now fall will equal 30. So if I pass through 30 right here, then I should get out onto the screen. It's getting cooler because 30 corresponds to fall. Yep, perfect. And now winter corresponds to 31 and spring corresponds to 32. So if I change this to 31, I should get the one for winter. Yep, perfect. Alright, so now if I were to just go ahead right here and create a season variable, so if I say season s and I just set season equal to summer, now in memory, wherever s is stored, there's a 50. So enumerations are just stored as numbers. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial on enumerations, so see you guys.